What's going on, everybody? Welcome to that effing fantasy morning after show. Adam is here. He will join us in just a bit. We got a lot to talk about today. We want to hear about your fantasy weekend. We want to know how you played out. Of course, we're going to talk about some of the best plays that happened last week, some of the best plays that will happen next week. And of course, we got some injuries to talk about. If you have caught yourself up, significant news in the injury world. Hey, a lot to do. Let's go. All right. Pretty crazy morning. We're going to try as we're not getting both people. There we go. Are you there, Adam?
I'm here.
All right, there we go. Now we got Adam in there. Man, there's a lot to talk about this weekend. We should probably start with injuries. We won't talk about all the injuries, but we have to open with what we saw or didn't see last night. The injury was so bad they wouldn't even show it again. Of course, if you're on social media at all, you've seen the injury. You've seen how that leg was bent. Dr. Brian at Fantasy Sports Corporation, I'm sure will weigh in on this, but it really doesn't take a doctor to know that not only is Chubb's season is 100% over, and they've already acknowledged that, but you have to wonder if this might be the end of a fantastic career.
I mean, it could be. That looked about as bad as any knee injury I've ever seen. You know, thoughts of guys like Willis McGahee and stuff like that come to mind when I see that kind of an injury. And unfortunately for Chubb, this isn't the first time he's dealing with an injury in that knee. He had complete reconstructive surgery while he was in college on that same knee. So really feel bad for the guy.
Man, it's crazy. I think, I'm old enough to remember guys like Christian Okoye and
Joe Theismann.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy to see something like that. You hate to see something like that happen. I know nobody wants to see that, and nobody wants to be a part of it. Even the Steelers fans, cheering Chubb off the field in true sports fashion is how it's supposed to go. Just
something I want to say real quick, like when it comes to Chubb and when it comes to injuries like this, like I know we're all like obsessive sports fans and we're all obsessive fantasy players, but sometimes it gets a little crazy with people. Like they just look at Chubb as like, well, now my fantasy team is ruined. Like this is still a real person with a family, with a life, who like this could affect the rest of his life, the way he walks. Like this could be the end of his livelihood as an NFL player. And like, I'm just as much of a fantasy fanatic as everybody else, but let's just remember these are humans before they are on our fantasy team.
No, 100%. It's just crazy to see that happen to a human being in general. And it's more obviously is going to be said about this all week, but we want to address the elephant in the room right off the bat for you guys, and then now we can kind of enjoy the
2 weeks now, and two major superstars of the NFL, Aaron Rodgers and Nick Chubb, now in consecutive weeks. Unfortunately, both of them happened on Monday night too, so both weeks it kind of put that bad taste in your mouth to kind of end the week. You had to like end it on that negative note. Let's just hope it's just these two, and this isn't going to be a trend moving forward this year.
I absolutely echo that. I had a friend, Roop, there it is, at Mr. Football Today. We know Roop if you're a fan of the show or have been following either of us for a while. And he had asked me, is it kind of just my opinion? It does seem like he asked me, are we seeing more injuries now than we used to see, or is it just because of social media and we have so much access to information? And to me, I kind of felt like we are in fact seeing more injuries than we used to see. And I think a lot of that is with youth getting kind of they're getting muscular faster. There's a lot more supplements out there. There's a lot more things that we're doing to our body naturally and unnaturally for these young athletes. And I do think it is affecting their body. I think it's affecting their durability. It's scientifically proven that a lot of the stuff these guys are putting in their bodies at a young age weakens the ligaments and muscle tissue and stuff like that. I think that there are a lot more injuries today than there used to be. I don't think it is just access to information. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like it's a little bit of both, right? Because the players are so much bigger and faster and stronger than they used to be, like the game has become more dangerous just from a physics standpoint, right? Like, I mean, it's
Right.
just simple physics, like mass times acceleration equals force, right? You know, like that's like a simple equation that we learned back in high school. And like, so the guys are bigger, the guys are faster, so the force is going to be more impactful, right? Also with the advances in modern medicine and modern science and the way they, you know, the imaging that they can do now and this and that, I think that also contributes to the more injuries because back in the day, there used to be a lot of injuries that they didn't even know that they had. And it was more just their coaches and teammates telling them to toughen up and get back out there, you know, throw some dirt on it. You remember that old phrase?
Oh, yeah. I say that all the time. I say it with my kids stuff all the time. I ask, rub some dirt on it, rub some tussin on it, we used to say too. But no, I agree with you. We're joined by Adam Hulse of Adam Hulse Sports, as we are every week, to break down your week 2 fantasy week. So before we get into the actual fantasy, we got to go back to the record watch. As you guys know, we broke down every team week by week, game by game, and told you what the records were going to be at the end of the season. And this week I did all right. I came out at 12-4. Adam came out 500, 8-8. And he's 500 on the season, 15-15. I'd take a little lead. It's only week 2, 20-12. I'm not bragging by any means. We're not there yet. A couple losses that could have gone either way with the overtime wins from Seattle and Tennessee. And you kind of went out on a limb for, going with the week 2 with some of these games that you wouldn't have picked later on in the season. In fact, did not pick when they meet again. And it just didn't happen to play out. So again, it's week 2, no big deal on this one, but some good games and some surprising results is really what I'm kind of getting at.
You know, this morning I was looking at the NFL in general and the standings and just kind of where we sit after 2 weeks, right? And
Right.
a couple of things that I noticed, okay? There are 9 teams right now that are 2-0 in the NFL, right? 3 of those teams just so happen to be from the NFC South, a division that we both thought would be one of the worst divisions in the NFL, right?
But we said it was going to be crazy like that because they all had to play each other.
Crazy. But I don't think anybody had 3 of those 4 teams starting off 2-0. Okay.
Yeah.
Also, of the 9 undefeated teams after 2 weeks, 7 of them are from the NFC conference, the conference that's supposed to be the weaker one than the AFC conference. Plus, you have a team in there like the Commanders, which we didn't really see that coming either, right? When you look at the other side, the 0-2 teams, okay? 3 playoff teams from last year, the Chargers, the Vikings, the Bengals, all started 0-3. Historically, teams that start 0-2, do not really make the playoffs at a very high clip. Teams that start 2-0 make the playoffs about 65% of the time. Pretty crazy number right there. Now, I know it's 2 games and things are going to change a lot as the year goes on, but this is just another one of those quick reminders that the season never plays out the way it's supposed to play out.
Yeah, and I read something about the 0-2 thing. 0-2 is not necessarily a death sentence. I mean, look, we're going to talk about the Bengals when we talk about
0-3
because they're 0-2 again.
0-3 is a death sentence.
0-3 is bad. 0-3 is bad. 0-2.
Yep. So those 3 teams, they're in those must-win situations this week, right?
But Bengals went 0-2 last year. They're 0-2 again this year, and we know how that played out. So it's not over yet for these teams that are 0-2, but we've got significant teams that are 0-2. 0-2 Bengals, all right? 0-2 Chargers, who are expected to do well this year. You've got
aren't they always?
Oh, well, 0-2 Vikings. You've got, these are teams that should not be 0-2 by any standard of expectation. And yet, like you said, here we are. And you got the Commanders sitting at 2-0. You've got the Falcons sitting at 2-0, the Buccaneers sitting at 2-0. Teams that, and it's early. We're not, but one of our things is overreactions. That's why we're here for the morning after. We're allowed to overreact a little bit. You are allowed to overreact a little bit on this show on Tuesday morning. So tell us about your fantasy week. Tell us what you like, don't like. Tell us about the big surprises in week 2 of your fantasy season. So as we get into that and the records, Dolphins being 2-0, is that, I don't know if that's a surprise yet. I mean,
not to me.
Not
to me.
I think that the Bills being 1-1 is more of a surprise than the Dolphins being 2-0.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. The Bills being 1-1 more of a surprise than 2-0. I mean, 1-1 is just fine to like start the year. The Bills bounced back in a huge way, destroyed the Raiders this week. But the Dolphins, to me, I mean, you know, I've been very consistent on how I feel about the Dolphins. To me, they are a true Super Bowl contender this year with a healthy Tua, who's also a true MVP contender if he remains healthy. So 2-0 Dolphins, not surprising at all to me.
The thing that's surprising about me, because you brought up how the Bills bounced back so big against Las Vegas, let's talk about the bounce backs for this week in the quarterback position. The top 10 quarterbacks from last week were not the same top 10 quarterbacks from this week. In fact, all the bottom tier guys moved up, and I don't mean they moved up a little bit. Every quarterback that's in your top 10 this week had a double-digit move this week. And what I mean is they moved up double digits from where they were last week, except for Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins was already in the top 10. He still went up 7 positions to QB2 this week. But QB1 this week, we'll surprise you with QB1. You might know who it is already, but we'll surprise you with QB1. We'll start at 10 and work our way up. Number 10, Ritter moved up 16 positions. Lamar at 9 also moved up 16 positions. Geno Smith moves up 17 positions for number 8. Allen, we know he didn't have a great week last week, comes back big this week, 13 positions up to number 7. Number 6 is Goff, who came up 12 positions. Number 5, any guess on who number 5 is, Adam? You won't get it.
Sam Howell.
Dobbs. Josh Dobbs from Arizona moves up 27 positions from dead last to QB 5. Jalen Hurts goes from 19 to 4, bounces back like he's supposed to. Wilson goes from 16 to 3. Russ cooking this week. Cousins, was mentioned, is QB2 at number 7. And number 1, moving up 27 positions. Who is it? Who is it, Adam? Who moved up 27 positions to QB1 this week?
It's slipping my mind right now.
You can do
it. Was it Daniel Jones?
It was Daniel Jones. Can you believe it? Daniel Jones goes.
You mean my guy? My guy in fantasy, Daniel Jones?
Did we tell you that Jones was going to be a good guy to have in fantasy? Let's overreact in week 2 and say, yes, we did. He moves up to QB1. And he is going to be, because he's going to be fighting from behind. He's going to be dealing with the Saquon Barkley injury, however, and that is going to take away a little bit of his stock as people fear the run a little bit less. But we'll get into that later on in the show. Your top guys also moved down. QB1 from last week, Tua drops 25 spots to QB26. Watson did not look good. Watson does not look good at all. Went from 5 to 27, dropped 22 spots. Zach Wilson comes in. He actually dropped 4 spots, if you can believe that. Pickett also did not look good, drops 8 more spots. Minshew comes in for Richardson. Garoppolo drops 19 spots from QB12 to QB31. Not really that surprising, but it's only week 2. The big surprise this week, do you know who was dead last? Can you take a shot at dead last this week?
Who was dead last this week?
I don't think you'll get this one either.
One
of our studs. One of everybody's studs. This is a stud QB. That's why I say you're not going to get it. This is one
Justin
of the guys.
Herbert.
Close. Same category. Trevor
Lawrence
finishes, drops from QB8 to QB32. Believe me, I have a lot of shares of Lawrence, and I would have guessed that right because he cost me this week. Trevor Lawrence not playing well, QB32.
I mean, you know, I'm the president of the Trevor Lawrence fan club, so this one doesn't look good for me either.
Well, hey, you got to have a bad week. It's only week 2. You played Kansas City. Yeah. Jones comes back, and so you're going to have to deal with that. it happens. It's week 2. I'm not really sweating it too much. Kansas City just, showing that who they are, confirming who we know them to be. So Lawrence finishing at 32, maybe lower than any bad day I would have expected this season, but I will say I don't expect it again. And, it happens. Tua dropping to 26 was a bit surprising. Watson from 5 to 27. I watched that game last night.
Yeah.
Watson does not look like a pro. I saw him grabbing face masks. I saw him touching officials, which I don't know how he got away with that, but he did. I saw him throwing tantrums. I saw him throwing horrible passes. Not passes that were a little bit off, passes that were way off. I would take Zach Wilson over Deshaun Watson at this point. That's the truth.
No way. For me, no chance in hell would I ever do that. To me, Zach Wilson is probably the worst quarterback in the NFL. He should not be a starter. It's debatable if he should even be a backup. Zach Wilson. He's had his opportunities and he's failed with every single one of them. He's never showed me one thing so far, Zach Wilson, that makes me think he's ever going to be a good quarterback. But again, he's had plenty of chances to be a starter and he's always looked awful. Though I don't disagree, Watson did look very bad last night. To me, last night, he just looked very frustrated and very frantic. And the Steelers pass rush can definitely do that to you, like for sure. They were all over him all night. 100%.
Yes.
Oh, they were all over him. And he did not handle it well at all. The pressure broke him last night for sure. He was sporadic. He was frantic. He was making bad decisions. He was all over the place. I agree. He looked terrible. But you can keep Zach Wilson.
I look, and I'm not going to try and pump up Kenny Pickett anymore.
Yeah, he didn't look much better. Let's be honest. He didn't look much better. The Steelers' defense scored more points than their quarterback.
The defense was on point last week. That linebacking core was ridiculous. They were dialed in, and they definitely.
How about Ogunjobi? Jesus, he was in the backfield every single play.
Man, Hightower, just the whole thing. The whole group was just ridiculous last night, and it looked good. Who did not look good was the New York Giants, and as a result, Joshua Dobbs finishes at number 5. And I'm talking about the Giants' defense. I actually picked them up for that game. Dropping Seattle's defense to do it in both leagues that I made the change in. Bad decision on my part.
Well, I mean, it's going to be a popular strategy this year to pick up the defense that plays the Cardinals, and there's nothing wrong with that strategy. It just didn't work out this week.
It did not. The Giants defense did not look great. Pittsburgh's did. Watson, Pickett.
And good luck to them on Thursday, by the way.
The Giants defense. Good luck. Exactly. The double-digit swings at quarterback, complete flip-flop of the top 10. It was, again, every quarterback in the top 10 had a double-digit move this week except Cousins, who was already up there and even still moved up 7. It was pretty fantastic. How did your team?
Interesting to me, though, about some of those top quarterbacks is a lot of them lost their games, right? And, that's the interesting part from, a fantasy perspective is that, a lot of times there's value in losing quarterbacks because the game script allows them to throw the ball a million times. Yes. And those mobile quarterbacks that scramble and they're in passing situations and they pick up yards, like a Jones, even though Jones came back and actually won the game, he was losing that game until the fourth quarter. And then, so yeah, when I look at kind of that top, a lot of them were losers, but they were winners in fantasy, right?
No, I mean, that's why we have Jones as one of our top fantasy backs, because we know they're going to be playing from behind the entire season.
Yeah.
That's how it was last year, and sometimes they pull out the win. Amazing comeback. It was a great game. Look, I'd like to bash the Giants. I like to bash Daniel Jones as much as anybody, but that was a fantastic comeback. It was a great display, and for us fantasy folks, it was amazing on our score sheets. Lawrence, of course, finishing QE 32 was not amazing. What went right? What went wrong on your fantasy score sheets? Let us know in the comments. Come join us on the show. Be part of it live. Tell us how your fantasy week went, and we will definitely talk about it because we want to know. 8-8 home teams and visitor teams this week. Nice even thing there, despite the surprises. We talked about the quarterbacks. Let's get into some running backs this week. Brian Robinson Jr. comes out as RB1 this week, just edging out Kyron Williams. We know the mess in LA right now, Cam is out. Akers is out. Drop Akers, get rid of Akers, dump him. He is officially not playing in LA. They literally benched him for no reason and put in Kyron. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know if it's a coaching staff, it's a personality problem, if they just don't like the talent. But the Rams have made a clear decision on who's going to be running the backfield then.
Keep an eye on Cleveland. Keep an eye on Cleveland. If he goes to the Browns, all of a sudden he's a stud again.
I've got shares of Kareem Hunt right now. I think he's the number one guy, obviously, to head back to Cleveland. He knows the playbook. There's no work there. He's plug and play. I know a lot of
Kareem Hunt definitely makes the most sense, but he didn't actually leave there under the best terms. He left there pretty pissed off with the organization, so he might not want to go back.
And he's kind of throwing a tantrum money-wise right now. He wants four teams have made offers, and he doesn't want any part of it. But he's
overvaluing himself.
You can still grab shares. Grab shares of Ford. We're going to talk about waiver watches in a few minutes. So we'll talk about Ford. We'll talk about Strong. But right now, we'll talk about fantasy performance. I hope you grab some shares of Kyron Williams. I know I did. He finishes at RB2, and he's going to be the guy in LA this week. Saquon Barkley finishes at RB3. We know he's injured. He's going to be out a couple weeks. Avoided the high ankle sprain, but does have an ankle sprain. They're expecting a couple weeks on that. DeAndre Swift comes in at RB4. So if you dumped your shares of Swift this week after week one, if you dumped your shares of Devonta Smith after week one, you're probably regretting that decision. Devonta Smith, of course, went huge. We'll get into him in a second. And Rasheem Mostert finishes up your top five. I just want to mention that Ford actually finished at number 6. But we'll say in the top 5, Mostert finishes at RB5. Honestly, if you had a top 10 back, and we'll run through the names real quick: Robinson Jr., Williams, Barkley, Swift, Mostert, Ford, McCaffrey, Rashad White gets in there. I know a lot of people dropping him after week one. Bijan and Zach Moss, if you happen to pick him up. That's your top 10. All of them got you 20 points in PPR format, and that's not too bad. I want 20 points from my guys. I'm sure you do too. Let us know how your guys finished up. Adam, how did your guys finish this week? How did you feel about the running back room across the NFL?
Love me some Kyron Williams. I picked him up in a lot of leagues. He looks good, right? I mean, he looks like a real, legit NFL running back. I think the Rams really did find something with, how did the Rams do this? You know what I mean? They found Puka Nacua, they found Kyron Williams, they got Tutu Atwell, and all of a sudden they got all these potential superstars running all over the field again in what looked like it was going to be a grueling rebuild for the Rams, especially when Cooper Kupp goes out. And if Cooper Kupp comes back now, watch out for the Rams, right?
Man, I tell you, the thing about Kyron, he had the fewest carries in the top 15 backs. Go 15 up, he had the fewest carries at 14 and still finishes at RB2. That's dangerous. That tells you something. Averaging 3.7 a carry, very respectable. You'd like to see more, but he can obviously break a big run. And here's the thing. This is the deal. 6 receptions for 48 yards. Kid catches the ball too. And that's what you really want out of today's fantasy running backs. That's why Saquon Barkley was sitting at number 3. That's why Rashad White is in your top 10 with 5 receptions himself. That's what you need, and Kyron gets it done in every aspect of the game. I hope you got some shares or are willing to trade, because he might be worth having. I definitely grabbed some shares myself.
Probably too late at this point if you don't have them already.
Yeah, you definitely could be right about that as well. Who underperformed? I think people expect a little more out of Chuba Hubbard this week. Josh Jacobs comes in at RB25. Didn't get much out of him. People grabbing Gus Edwards. I said, don't do it. Don't bother. But they did. He finishes at RB22. David Montgomery gets hurt at the end of the game. We'll get injuries in a little bit. Finishes RB21. Jamar Gibbs at RB20. You'd like to see that a little higher, but I think you will see that go higher. We'll talk about the Montgomery injury as the show goes on. Ramondre Stevenson, don't panic, but finishes at RB17. Miami's defense isn't horrible. And, of course, Kenneth Walker, not a lot of yards, but he gets you the 2 touchdowns to save your fantasy day. So, RB room, again, top 10, you got 20 points out of it. And honestly, if you had a top 14 back, you got 18. So not really a big drop for those first 14 guys. A lot of people doing well in the RB room in week 2.
Yeah, a lot of running backs showed up this week. Most of them put up solid production. Not even many of the big names had huge dud weeks this week. Of course, there was some that you'd like to see a little bit more out of, but you didn't really see a whole bunch of disaster performances this week.
Exactly. I mean, it was week 2. Like I said, it's week 2. We're not gonna get too crazy. How did your guys finish up? Let us know. We are gonna head into the wide receiver room. Some familiar names here. We got Keenan Allen. We got Mike Evans at 3. T. Higgins shows up to get number 4. Lockett shows up. This is one of his weeks, and that's how Lockett is. If you know anything, Lockett shows up at 6. Puka at number 2. There he is. I hope you got some Puka shares. I did. Spent the fab that I needed to grab Puka, and there you go. The Rams, like you said, wide receiver 2, running back 2. Adam Holz Sports NFL writer, kills it again with the Rams picks. And the Cooper Kupp fill-ins. Did you guys get any piece of them? Let us know. We'd love to talk about your fantasy rosters. Let us know in the comments. Nico Collins. A lot of people, Nico Collins, one of those guys that was kind of polarizing. You're either on board or you weren't. Finishes at number 5 this week against the Colts. How you feeling about that one?
If you remember to last week's show, Nico Collins was a guy that I threw out there as plug him into your lineups, and he was an excellent DFS value play for me last week that I suggested, and he delivered. Love me some Nico Collins.
Yeah, people really loving Nico Collins right now. And again, it's one of those teams that's going to be playing catch up all year, and Nico is going to be one of the guys catching the ball. Stroud doing a decent job of actually spreading the ball around. And we can talk about Stroud in a little bit if we want to. CeeDee Lamb gets back to where he's supposed to be at number 7. Jefferson, where he always is, at number 8 inside the top 10. Josh Reynolds getting in at 9. He was one of those picks that we said grab this week. And Devonta Smith is for real. As we've been saying, I don't know, for months, everyone's been saying it, though. Some people didn't believe it, and they dropped him after week 1. Wishing they hadn't done that now. Devonta Smith is going to be an asset on your fantasy roster most of the season, I would say, Adam. Let's see. Christian Kirk, I would have. Yeah, you hear, Adam?
Yeah, I'm here.
There we go. Okay. I'll go back to Devonta Smith, and also I want to bring in Christian Kirk on this conversation. Christian Kirk finishes at 13, which is good in the wide receiver room. 11 receptions is the big reason you get 22 points out of Christian Kirk. So he's a volume play this week. Devonta Smith and Christian Kirk, those are those wide receiver 2s that absolutely can play like wide receiver 1s, but I think on more of a consistent basis than maybe a Tyler Lockett who shows up when he shows up. But I think that Christian Kirk and Devonta Smith are going to be there a lot more consistently.
I would agree with that, especially, with the expected rise of JSN at some point this year, and he's going to get his touches more as the year goes on. What's nice about Devonta Smith is that even on weeks that he doesn't get a whole lot of volume, because he didn't pull in a bunch of receptions this week, but he can be a big play machine. He did a lot with a little this week, which gives him a higher floor than some because he doesn't need high volume necessarily to make a huge impact. As for Christian Kirk, it's been a tale of 2 weeks for Kirk. He was completely irrelevant in week 1. He was a huge deal in week 2. After week 1, he was one of those guys where we kind of said, look, don't panic just yet on Christian Kirk. That was probably the worst game that he's going to have all year. To me, the question was week 2 the best game he's going to have all year? Did he just get his worst and best out of the way? Still don't know exactly what Christian Kirk is, but don't panic on Kirk. Don't, release him or anything like that. He's probably going to be just fine, especially in a Trevor Lawrence offense.
Look, a guy that gets 11 receptions, second only to Puka. Puka gets 15. CeeDee Lamb, Jefferson, and Christian Kirk all get 11. That's a nice room to be associated with, Lamb, Jefferson, and Christian Kirk. He gets 110 yards, but like I said, he didn't get the touchdown. So it's the 11 receptions in a PPR format. If you played in a standard format, you obviously didn't like Christian Kirk nearly as much this week as the PPR folks did. And so that's one of the things to watch. We talked about Houston. We talked about Nico Collins being at number 5. Hey, look, Houston also had the number 19 receiver. Again, wide receiver room, not so bad. 20 points for Tank Dell. I'm not going to go so far as to say go grab all the shares of Tank Dell you can. What I am going to say is if you are in a deeper league and you need to have a receiver on your roster, you need to have somebody that looks to get some shots. Tank Dell, 7 of 10 targets, caught 7 of them, gets the touchdown, which helps as well. But at least they're throwing him the ball. You got 2 receivers on a team in Houston that's always going to be playing from behind. These are, the sleeper guys. These are the deep league guys. These are the 3-4 receiver, super flex sets that you're kind of looking for. Tank Dell's one of those guys that could have fantasy value as the season goes on. One to watch.
Yeah, I mean, he's a fine ad for fantasy rosters right now if he's still available in your league. He's a good bench stash. I wouldn't be rushing to get him in my lineup next week, right, but I'd be fine with keeping him on my bench for now. For guys who play Dynasty, Tank Dell's been on their radar pretty much all offseason. He's already been a pretty attractive guy to pay attention to, so he might actually be a little bit ahead of schedule. It was likely that he was going to get more involved as the year went on. It happened maybe sooner than thought. CJ Stroud had a really big game. You mentioned him quickly before. Well, really big passing day for Stroud in this one. Another one of those situations like we talked about, a team that's going to play from behind a lot. There is some value in their quarterback and in their receivers just because the game script is going to dictate that they get more volume.
Yeah, look, sorry, I think I unmuted when I coughed there. I apologize for that if I did. CJ Stroud, 384 yards. Believe that's the best of the day. Yeah, 384. Cousins was 364 behind him, 20 yards behind him. Finishes at QB 13 because it just gets the end zone twice, 30 of 47, 63%. You'd like to see the percentage go up, but percentages, I don't really like percentages because they can be skewed. 384 yards, good enough for QB 13 this week, 21 points. If you get 20 out of your fantasy player, I'm happy. I don't know how you feel about it. I don't care who the player is. If I get 20, like that's a good day.
Something I saw about CJ Stroud too, and not to throw Justin Fields under the bus here, but CJ Stroud already has more 300-yard games than Justin Fields during their careers. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, just throwing that out there in week 2. But that's what you're looking for. We talk about Daniel Jones. We want the teams that are going to play from behind, but they got to be able to do it successfully. So you can't do it like we saw Cleveland do in the second half last night. That is not how you want to play from behind because nobody got any points out of that. Same with Pittsburgh. Thank God for the defense. Pittsburgh playing from behind for most of the game until the fourth quarter. Again, that's not how you want a team to play from behind. That's not going to benefit you in a fantasy manner. But teams like the Giants with Daniel Jones, and maybe, we got something here in Houston. Maybe they are capable enough to play from behind and add fantasy value to your roster.
Yeah, and the thing with me with Stroud, from a fantasy perspective, is he doesn't run a whole lot. It's without the legs, that does definitely limit his upside, even though he is going to be throwing the ball a whole lot. That's why, we mentioned guys like Nico Collins and Tank Dell, right? Those are the guys that could really benefit from that situation. And through 2 weeks, they both have.
And even the Rams. The Rams are a team that you at least expected to be playing from behind a lot. And now you've got, they've got wide receiver 2, running back number 2 on week 2. So, the teams that can successfully play from behind add value to your fantasy roster. George Pickens ends up at wide receiver 11, despite only getting 4 catches, much like Devonta. Devonta at 10, Pickens at 11. They both only caught 4 balls, but they did something with them. And that is obviously a big deal in fantasy. Marvin Mims Jr. at 18 gets 113 yards, finds the end zone on only 2 receptions. Garrett Wilson finds the end zone on only 2 receptions, ends up with 83 yards. Thing with Garrett Wilson, he got thrown to 8 times and was only able to haul in 2. And I'll tell you what, those 6 misses are not all on Garrett Wilson, as you have already gone on the Wilson bashing train this morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough for Garrett Wilson fantasy owners. That may have been the most painful part from a fantasy perspective with Aaron Rodgers being out for the season, is Garrett Wilson downgrading from Aaron Rodgers to Zach Wilson. Garrett Wilson was going in the first or second round of pretty much every fantasy draft out there. a lot of that had to do with the huge upgrade at quarterback to Aaron Rodgers coming off of his Rookie of the Year season. Downgrading to Zach Wilson definitely is going to hurt his outlook for the rest of the year.
Yeah. If you go to the Fantasy Sports Corporation channel, which is possibly where you're watching this live right now, there is a show, Wake Up, TSS from TSS Fantasy Wake Up on Sunday mornings. And I have a bit there at the end where I kind of tell you people not to grab. I said not to grab Cam Akers. That was a win. I said not to grab Breece Hall, not going too far out on a limb, but against that Dallas defense, that's absolutely ridiculous. I said, don't grab Breece Hall. I said, don't grab Garrett Wilson.
We only had 4 touches, man. 4 touches for Breece Hall.
I'm telling you. And I said, don't grab Garrett Wilson. And I said, tight ends don't matter except for Kelsey Hogginson and with Andrews coming back. Other than that, stop worrying about tight ends. I say that so that you'll go watch the show on Sunday mornings, but also to toot my own horn a little bit, but to bring in the Dallas defense. That's really my thing here, because Dallas defense is playing absolutely out of their mind right now. On the season, they're number one in basically every statistical category that you want to have. You being a Dallas fan, I know this is something that you're loving right now, but even as a football fan, it's pretty fun to watch something like that, unless, of course, your team's on the other side.
My Cowboys have looked phenomenal through these first 2 weeks. Like you're saying, as a Cowboys fan, enjoying watching it. I couldn't have enjoyed these first 2 weeks more from a Cowboys fan perspective. 70-10 is the Cowboys' point differential through 2 games of the season. I'll take it.
Yeah, look, number 1 in sacks, actually tied with Washington. We talked about that Washington defense was going to be the only bright spot in Washington over the season. Sam Howell's been pretty decent. I'm not going to bash Sam Howell too much just yet. He's been doing the job, but the defense is obviously the star of the show. But Dallas, number 1 in sacks at 10, number 1 in interceptions with 5, forced fumbles. Dallas comes in at number 2 with 4, and that's after last night, after Pittsburgh's magnificent show. They are destroying 22-point lead. That's a whole week's lead in fantasy points for the Cowboys. If you had the Dallas Cowboys defense this year, you're probably doing well.
I have a whole bunch of shares of them, and I made sure I got a whole bunch of shares of them. Micah Parsons is for real. I said adding Stephon Gilmore really helps that secondary. It's going to give them more opportunities for turnovers as well. This is a very, very good defense with one of the best defensive coordinators in Dan Quinn in the entire NFL. Multiple years now under Dan Quinn, so this system is fully established now and fully ready to go. It's not being introduced anymore. It's being perfected, and watch out for that Cowboys defense.
Let's get into the waiver watch. Got to get into waivers, and talk about waivers. We got to talk about some of the injuries. This is in no particular order, but of course, Deontay Johnson's going to be out a couple of weeks. That'll up your Pickens stock, and I would say that's probably about it. I'm not grabbing anything in Pittsburgh right now until they get things together, except that defense. Jalen Waddle is on concussion protocol. Watch that one. Barkley going to be out a couple weeks with an ankle. Burrow aggravated that calf. Watch Burrow this week. I think he'll play. He's got till Monday night to get it all together. He thinks he'll play, but even in his own words, day to day. Let's see. We got, of course, Richardson is on concussion protocol, left the game. Adams also on concussion protocol. Logan Thomas ends up back on concussion protocol. You knew he was going to get injured if you have stocks of him. It happens every single year. Nothing against him. It just happens. OBJ injured an ankle. Watch him if you are putting any stock in him. Mooney goes out with a knee. Montgomery goes out with a thigh injury. Watch that one if you have Jamar Gibbs stock. And, of course, Nick Chubb, which we've already talked about, and unfortunately his season at minimum is over, which is unfortunate. So watch. I think that's probably the number 1 spot that people are going to go. We talk about Ford and Strong. You also have to factor in if they go outside and try to grab like a Kareem Hunt or even a Cam Akers you brought up in Cleveland. I think that's where people are going to go with the forward and strong, but not necessarily going to take you the whole season with that grab, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this week, right now, like unless, something develops before the end of the night and a trade happens or something becomes more clear, I think it's, definitely the number one waiver wire at this very moment is going to be Ford. I mean, it has to be Ford, right?
Yeah.
Like until the Browns do
awesome.
something, I mean, he looked great last night.
He really did.
And that might have been enough. Who knows? Maybe the Browns are going to say he did good enough last night to get him another start. And if he keeps going like this, look, I mean, the Browns still have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL that was built for the running game, right? Like they built their offensive line to run the ball. They have one of the best running schemes under Kevin Stefanski. You remember last year when Dearness Johnson played that game and he 100%. Put up 100 and something yards? So it's starting to look like their system, similar to like the 49ers system, that pretty much any running back can be productive in that kind of a system. It won't be as, like, I'm not saying Ford is going to be Nick Chubb. He's not going to put up Chubb type of numbers, but he might be good enough as their starter.
He might get Chubb type volume. And because if he can play like he continued to play like he did last night, we can keep the game plan, because if Watson's going to keep playing the way he played, you got no choice. Barkley, so the replacement for Barkley is Matt Breida, San Francisco 49er, did well there. I think he's a good fill-in. Again, he's not going to put up Barkley numbers, but I'm okay. I've actually already put in my waiver request for Matt Breida. I think he's a nice fill-in, again, on a team that's going to be consistently playing from behind, and normally that favors receivers, but maybe not in New York.
I think that adding Breida is fine, like you said, as a speculative add, but I'm not starting him this week. Even if he's the starting running back against the 49ers, I am not starting Breida on a short week on Thursday against one of the best defenses in the NFL. If you do add him from waivers, in my opinion, you should be just leaving him on the bench this week and take a wait-and-see approach with it.
Yeah, you can get him probably, nice and cheap, and I think that 49ers will scare off some of the competition as well. That 49ers matchup this week, number one rush defense going into this week. And so I agree. Yeah, you're not going to want to play him. So I think you'd be able to get him cheap if you're looking to have a running back to kind of fill in there. Adam's on the concussion. But the thing with the concussion protocol is that it's almost a guarantee to miss the next game, because the way the concussion protocol is laid out, the different benchmarks you have to hit, the requirements that are laid out, it makes it very hard to come back for next week's game. So when you have guys like Richardson, and I'm not telling you necessarily to grab Minshew, but when you have guys like Richardson and Adams, Devonta Adams on concussion protocol, Jalen Waddle, those are areas where you can get maybe a stream play or something like that, because you almost have to expect those guys. And if they're on your roster, start looking for a backup plan, because they'll most likely miss their next game.
Yeah, like, I don't know if I'd say that they'll most likely miss their next game, but I'd say it's about a 50-50 shot at best, because these concussion protocols, like, it's so unique to each individual player, right? We've seen times where guys are back in a couple days and they clear the protocols and they're ready to go. And then there's other times where it could take weeks sometimes to clear these protocols, because they are very careful. They're very cautious. They're overly cautious by design. Like, sometimes they'll not let you return to the game because you're showing signs, and then you get cleared like the next day or after the game or whatever, overcautious by design. So you're right. These guys who are in the protocols are legitimate threats to not play next week. So like you said, guys like Waddle, guys like Devonta Adams, those are pretty important guys to keep an eye on from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, and as we finish up the waiver wire talk, and you can add in other guys to look at, the thing with this week's waiver wire, and this is going to sound wrong the way I say it, but I don't mean it the way it sounds. You didn't get any advantageous injuries this week, okay? And I'm not talking about the humanity part. We don't want to see players get injured, but when players get injured from the fantasy perspective, that's what we're talking about. We look for, how can I benefit from this injury? Look, Deontay Johnson going down does not benefit us. Does not benefit your fantasy play, your waiver watch. because there's no one to grab in Pittsburgh. Waddle doesn't really give you anybody to grab. Barkley going down with Breida facing the 49ers doesn't really help you this week. Things like that. Players went down. Unfortunately, Chubb is maybe the one place that you can look for a replacement, but you have to be aware of the committee approach as they do try to find and solidify a replacement on that one. So while there are injuries,
while I do agree with you, while I do 100% agree with you, you know as well as I do, there's going to be a lot of leagues out there where there's that guy that spends their entire fab on Ford this week.
Yes,
there's a lot of people going all in. They're going to be zero fab after this week because in their minds, Ford is now Chubb in their minds.
Yeah, I say don't do it. I say don't do it. I say go for him. I say take
for him, but don't overshoot. Don't overshoot.
Yeah, don't drop all your fab on it this week for Ford. We're going to get into the best plays for week 2. I definitely want to talk about that, but I want to talk a little NFL before we do that because I like to end the show on the best grabs. Monday night had 2 Monday night games. Next Monday night, also 2 Monday night games. This is something you're going to see a lot this season. ESPN has 100% been transparent and said, we want to grab the money. We want to grab the viewers. We want to have a game on ESPN. We want to have it on our partner station, ABC. We're going to put 2 games out there. We're going to see who gets watched, which game gets watched, which time slot gets watched. My question to you, sir, Monday Night Football, 2 games a week. Is this good or bad for the fan and for football?
I think it's actually good. I didn't really like it when I first heard about it, but last night, as both games were going on at the same time, I kind of liked having 2 games. You know what I mean? We're already used to on a Sunday at 1:00 paying attention to sometimes up to 8 games at a time at 1:00 and multiple games at 4:00 too. Yeah. So why is it that, Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night have to just be one standalone game? We have options at the 2 main time slots of the week, so why not have options at all of them? I'm all for it. Why not?
Yeah, it doesn't get it. That way, if one game sucks, I can go watch the other game, and hopefully both games don't suck. This week,
because that's been a big complaint, especially about Thursdays, right? Everybody has been complaining that Thursday night football is garbage. It's not worth watching, this, that, and whatever. They all say that. They all watch it anyway, but they say, I'm not watching this anymore, right? And we say that every week, and then we go and watch it again anyway. That's kind of, how it goes with Thursday. So that's kind of the NFL responding to, okay, well, what if we had 2 games? Let's try this out. Let's test this out. And kind of like you said, if one's bad, you can go to the other. Or it was kind of fun last night, too, kind of switching back and forth at certain times, when games got to certain points. I mean, most of us have multiple screens at this point anyway. You can put one on your TV, one on your laptop or your iPad or whatever. So, I mean, why not? And more is better, in my opinion.
And I do like the Thursday night lineup has worked out so far. Again, we're only week 2. We're coming into week 3, but I like the games that they put on so far. I like the matchups. I'm good with it. This Monday, we get Eagles, Buccaneers, both 2-0. So someone isn't going to be undefeated after this week. And then you've got Rams at Bengals, which is interesting in the fact that the Rams are playing better than they should. The Bengals are sitting at 0-2 where nobody expected them to be. Again, not panicking. They were 0-2 last year as well. But kind of a situation for the Bengals, they really need to win this game on Monday night.
They do, and this is, kind of a Super Bowl rematch from a couple years ago. They get to play the Rams, who beat them in that Super Bowl, of course, and 0-2, obviously the big question mark is Burrow going to play?
Yep.
I would think he is going to play, even if that cap is bothering him, because they're 0-2. I think if the Bengals were 2-0, maybe Burrow wouldn't play. But this is kind of getting into the Bengals got to get it going now. And they've looked pretty bad in those first 2 games, especially in week 1 against the Browns. They were absolutely terrible. Definitely interesting to watch there.
Hey, guess who the worst quarterback in the NFL is, sitting at 32? I mean, I guess there's 33 with Minshew in there now, but sitting at 32. Hey, it's Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow.
Who put money on that? Because they're a very rich person right now.
Not that this is the reason why, but it's something we talked about a lot with these contracts. You get the big contract and it changes things sometimes. I'm not saying that Burrow is playing terribly because he got paid, but it's just another one of those examples that, sometimes the production drops when you aren't chasing that major contract anymore. And
exactly.
I know he's hurt and this and that and the other thing, but it's a real thing. He got paid and now he's regressed for 2 weeks of this year. Wait, I can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about
There
that.
you go.
Thank you. Had the mute on while I was drinking my coffee.
There you go.
But yeah, I don't know if I put necessarily Burrow in that category yet, but I definitely
No,
hear
I mean,
what
you
you're
can't
saying, and
yet.
you know I
It's
feel
just
that way.
something to,
Yeah,
you can't put him in that category yet, like a contract and then bust type of guy. But
But
let's
I do
just
put
keep an eye
Watson
on
in
that.
that category. I do put Jalen Hurts. I'm watching him to see how he comes out of that story, sitting at QB9 right now. He finished QB4 this week, so again, I'm not overreacting. Deshaun Watson, I 100% put in that category. So there's stories there that
Keep an eye on Lamar Jackson too. He's another one.
Yeah, 100%. So going into this week, as we finish up the show, the last few minutes, we like to talk about who are the plays for this week. Giants, 49ers, play your 49ers, obviously. Any 49er you got. If you can go grab somebody, grab them, because the Giants defense is clearly not ready. And the 49ers are cooking on all cylinders right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty easy game to approach. If you have 49ers, play them. If you have Giants, sit them.
Broncos at Dolphins. Obviously, you're going to play your Dolphins. Broncos typically have a good defense, but they're still trying to get it together when we're week 3. We see a lot of teams still trying to figure it out and gel together. Do you want to play your Broncos against the Dolphins? That's really kind of the question in this one, I think.
I think that you want to play your Broncos wide receivers because I think that the Dolphins are going to score points on most teams this year, and the Broncos may have to throw to keep up. So, yeah, I mean, I'm playing Courtland Sutton this week.
Between Judy and Mims still did well. I believe he's wide receiver 13. Mims still got you points. Mims got you a lot of points sitting on my bench, actually. Mm-hmm. Judy getting worked in, but I think Judy probably comes up, passes Mims this week, I think.
Oh, I mean, I would definitely think so. Mims, I think, is still fine as a bench stash. He's not a guy I'm plugging into lineups just yet, despite his big game. But let's remember, he only caught 2 balls. They just both happened to be deep balls, and he put up the touchdown. So for me, he's still a nice bench piece, but I'm not rushing to get him into lineups just yet.
I hear you. Patriots at Jets. I'm not playing Patriots, not against that defense. That Jets defense, the offense ain't doing them any favors, but that Jets defense is still for real. So I don't know if I'm going to play Patriots other than Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry, top tight end 2 weeks in a row. I think he finished tight end number 2 this week. Tight end 1 last week. So Hunter Henry, I'll probably still play him. Jets offense, I'm not playing anybody. Even the Jets offense, I might throw in a Breece Hall, I might throw in a Garrett Wilson, but it's against the Patriots, and they do have a pretty good defense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you have Wilson, Garrett Wilson on your roster, you're not benching Garrett Wilson. But there's nobody from this game that I'm excited to play. I see this as most likely a very ugly, defensive, low-scoring game. So that's where you can target. If you're in a league that still has defenses, Jets and Patriots defense both make sense as plays this week.
Absolutely. Texans at Jaguars. This is a fantasy treasure trove right here. The Jaguars will go against that nice loose Texans defense, and the Texans will be playing catch up against a defense that you can play catch up against. I see some good fantasy numbers here. Lawrence will not be QB 32 this week.
I agree with you. I like everybody in this game. Play, the Texans wide receivers. You can play Pierce. You play all your Jaguars in this one. I think this is a very conducive game to fantasy scoring, so I agree with you.
Titans at Browns. People are going to grab those shares of Ford this week. I have no problem with that.
Good luck against the Titans. Yeah.
Titans, of course, you're going to play Henry, obviously. Tannehill playing pretty well. I mean, he's not, finishing in the top 10 fantasy wise or anything like that. But if you have Titans offensive players, Tannehill's, doing his best to help you out.
He is. The Browns are a tough defense, though. They have a very good pass defense as well. This is another one of those games. I'm not super excited to play anybody from this game. The defenses look okay. Ford, good ad on the waiver wire, like we said, but he's another one of those guys. Like, if I pick him up from the waiver wire this week, even if he is named the Browns starter, I'm probably leaving him on my bench because the Titans' run defense is brutal.
Hopefully you got somewhere else to back up. But yeah, it could be a good play later. Falcons at Lions, another one I think you can get a lot of fantasy points out of this one as the Falcons go to Detroit.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. I like a lot of guys in this game. Really like Drake London. He was another one of those bounce back guys from this week, right? Awful in week one, did absolutely nothing in week one. He did more what he was supposed to do in week two. I think he keeps that going in week three against the Lions, who can definitely be beat defensively.
Yeah, and the Lions, Josh Reynolds fans are loving it right now. You got a few more weeks to ride that out and keep riding it. Goff is doing well. This is, again, Falcons at Lions. Good spot to get some fantasy points. We got Saints at Packers. I'm not mad at this one either. I think, your usual suspects are going to do well. Love is playing as well as Green Bay could expect him to play. I like fantasy points for Green Bay for New Orleans at Packers as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm as excited about this game from a fantasy perspective as that. The Saints defense is still pretty good. The Packers defense pretty good against the pass in particular. I think this game is okay, but not super exciting from a fantasy perspective.
It's not as good as Falcons Lions, that's for sure. It's not as good as Texans Jags. Texans Jags, Falcons Lions, those might be the top ones as we go through this. Bills at Commanders. Honestly, you can get, if you got one of these big rosters, these super flex, like where you got 3, 4, 5 spots for receivers and stuff like that, you got multiple play who you want spots, you might be able to squeeze in a Commander on this one. But their defense is playing awesome. We're going to see, Josh Allen and company under pressure this week.
Yeah, I mean, I like Dotson and McLaurin this week. I think that they're going to have to throw the ball to keep up with Josh Allen and the Bills, and they've both been, looked pretty good so far. So, yeah, I agree. I think there's some sneaky value on both of the Commanders' receivers.
Absolutely. Adam Holtz, NFL writer, Adam Holtz Sports, running through who to play and who not to play this week. Chargers at Vikings. I like this one too. Both teams have been letting the other team give you some fantasy value. This might be number 3 after those other 2 games we talked about to get some fantasy points. I like this one.
Oh, yeah, this one, I mean, the Chargers, by the way, they've scored 1 million points this year and haven't won a game.
Nope.
I think they scored, 57 or 58 points so far this year, and they also have not turned the ball over. So to score that many points, not have a turnover, and not win a game, I mean, it almost seems impossible, when you look at that. But it's the Chargers, and they found a way to do it. As for this game, I'm starting everybody in this game. I love everybody on both offenses. I see this as a shootout, high-scoring game. Start all your Vikings, start all your Chargers, get them all in the lineup.
So we got Texans at Jags, especially start your Jags. We got Falcons at Lions, start everybody. We got Chargers at Vikings, start everybody. And then, of course, the byline here, someone's going 0-3. Someone's season may be, statistically done after that one. Colts at Ravens. Ravens defense playing a little better. Minshew probably going to be the guy in for this one. Watch that. I don't know if I want to play anybody in this one.
Yeah, I mean, again, not like a super exciting game, from a fantasy perspective. I mean, Pittman has been pretty good so far this year, so I guess you're starting Pittman if you have Pittman, and I guess, the Ravens, I mean, I don't know, who I like with the receivers. Odell Beckham, by the way, might be injured. He might not be playing this next upcoming week. So maybe a guy like Flowers or Bateman gets a little boost this week if Beckham can't go.
Comes through this week for you. That's a good point. Panthers at Seahawks. I like my Seahawks in this one.
Love the Seahawks in this one. Love Kenneth Walker this week. He's probably my favorite of the Seahawks to play, but they all look pretty good against the Panthers.
Bears at Chiefs. Temper your expectations on the Chiefs wide receiver room. It gets passed all around. Good luck. Roll the dice. Figure out who's going to do well. But Kelsey and Mahomes should have a nice week.
Yeah, and this is one of those spots where like the Bears are probably playing from behind all game. So maybe DJ Moore and Justin Fields are good plays this week because they're going to have to do a lot to keep up with how many points the Chiefs are going to score against their defense.
Cowboys at Cardinals. Don't expect the Cardinals of last week to show up this week. Big difference between the Giants defense and the Cowboys defense. The Arizona defense has been playing well, so you might get a little lower output from your Cowboys players, but I'm still playing them.
Start your Cowboys. There's really no Cardinals that I'm starting this week against the Cowboys defense. And get the Cowboys defense into your lineups if I'm not stating the obvious there.
Obviously. Steelers at Raiders. I'm not playing anybody in this game.
Steelers, Raiders, probably an ugly game, probably a low-scoring game. I'll pass.
Yeah, Pickens you might have to throw him in there. I don't know. Eagles at Buccaneers. That should be a good one, but I don't know if you're going to get big fantasy numbers out of this one.
Probably not, because the Bucs both teams are very good at stopping the run, right? And both teams are going to want to run the ball. So again, probably a low-scoring game.
Play your Devonta though. Play Devonta. Play him. And Rams at Bengals. This should be a good game. I think you'll get decent fantasy points, at least from the Rams side. Go ahead, play your Williams, play your Puka. That's why you got him. The Bengals, Burrow reliant. Keep a watch to see if he's going to play, see how healthy he is. Hasn't put up big numbers for you so far. And honestly, you might get discouraged in week 3 as well from a fantasy aspect.
Puka Nacua, the story of the NFL through the first 2 weeks.
You got it. Thanks for joining us. We're a little over time. We apologize for that, but we don't apologize for bringing you great fantasy football stuff. Thanks for joining us. Adam Holz at Adam Holz Sports, NFL writer, joins us every week to break down your fantasy week. I'm here, Chris Fox. You can catch me all over the place on the Fantasy Sports Corporation channel, and a lot of great content over there as well. Get through your fantasy week, win. Follow Fantasy Sports Corporation. Follow Adam Holz at Adam Holz Sports. You can find us at That Effin' Show. This has been That Effin' Fantasy Morning After Show. We did it live. We did it with you. We'll be here next Tuesday, 9:30 every Tuesday. Come join us. Have a great fantasy week, everybody, and we will see you next time.